my topic is All Pro Label Compliance, and we're going to go into detail and really try to focus on the sport nutrition, sport food, and sport supplement categories. I'll be your coach. So when we look at foods and dietary supplements, just the groundwork is that the FDA governs both, and they've done a very good job over the years putting in place GMPs and guidelines so that brands and suppliers, manufacturers, and so forth can operate with compliance and transparency. There are clear definitions and characteristics with food as well as dietary supplements. One of the most important is the nutritional intent. Dietary supplements are aptly named. They are meant to supplement the diet with nutrients to elevate the level of nutrients from foods. And another thing about dietary supplements is that they cannot represent a food, nor can they be the sole source of nutrition for a meal or be positioned as a replacement for food in the diet. The reference amount customarily consumed is also a key driver in the difference between foods and dietary supplements. There's an old adage that if it walks like a duck, it's a duck. If it nourishes or eats like a duck, then it's probably a duck. And we'll go into a little bit more detail as we move through. Let's start with sport foods. Sport foods will have a nutrition facts panel, and the information that you will find, and there's a very defined format, the information will always be consistent on the nutrition facts panel. And they include calories, total fat, saturated fat, and so forth, plus the newer additions with added sugars, and then a addition of some of the different micronutrients in the 2020 revisions of the FDA guidelines for food. All ingredients must be GRAS ingredients, and as we mentioned earlier, the RACC, the reference amount customarily consumed, at an eating occasion, is a key driver of the basis of a food format. And you can find those guidelines very easily on the internet. The FDA has laid them out very nicely for you to go in, dig in, and sort of better understand labels. Dietary supplements, typically they're in the form of tablets, capsules, soft gels, liquids, powders, and they're meant for oral ingestion only. So inhalants aren't dietary supplements. The absorption must take place across the lining of the digestive tract. You typically find vitamins, minerals, herbs, and other botanicals. And again, they're meant to supplement the diet, not necessarily to be a replacement for food. So always keep in mind it's the intent of a product that will really drive the base understanding of whether or not it falls into a sport food or a sport dietary supplement. Just a little bit more detail about dietary supplements. They will always have supplement facts. Dietary supplements have dietary ingredients, which are typically isolated nutrients, concentrates, extracts, and so forth. All of these are listed within the body of the supplement facts panel. Source has to be named when it's appropriate, such as a botanical. You need to identify the source or the part of the plant. Dietary supplements can use proprietary blends where ingredients are grouped together as a proprietary blend, sometimes given a more fanciful name in the supplement facts below the line. But this practice isn't as common as years gone by, as the consumer seems to be gravitating more towards greater transparency. It's also important that with food, you have the daily value nutrients, so that's listed in nutrition facts. And any nutrient or anything that's in a nutrition facts panel where the levels are found in significant amounts in a dietary supplement, these need to be labeled on the dietary supplement as well. So anytime a significant level greater than or equal to 2% of the daily value or calories at 5 calories or greater, okay, this needs to also be labeled on supplement facts above the line. Things that are interesting that sometimes you see is zeros on supplement facts panels. Well, you can't supplement the diet with nothing. So a zero is not appropriate on a supplement facts panel. Also, something that's interesting is that, amino acids, which are a classic ingredient, dietary ingredient, they do not count as protein. So you cannot label amino acids as protein. There's some key differences and some definite overlaps between foods and dietary supplements. Nutrition Facts has required information, consistent, from product to product. The nutrition facts panel is very well defined. But supplements as well as foods must list all ingredients with very few exceptions, which may be a processing aid at the manufacturer level. But by and large, all ingredients must be identified on both food and dietary supplements. There are overlaps to the types of claims that can be made on foods as well as dietary supplements. Structure function claims, those can be used on both types of products where you define and explain the application of a nutrient to the general structure or function of the body or body part. There's also consistency around rules for class 1, class 2, and third group nutrients. Starting with class 1 nutrients. A class 1 nutrient is a nutrient that's added in specific amounts and labeled as such. These would be nutrients that you would find in the supplement facts panel, or nutrients that would be added to a food to fortify it. Class 1 nutrients must be at 100% or greater of the labeled claim throughout the life of the product. So if there's an expiration date 2 years after, these nutrients need to be at 100% or greater at that level at the end of that expiration date. Okay, now this really requires some diligence on the part of brands as well as suppliers. And so during the formulation process, we have to dig into supplier documents to make sure that all the information is accurate as well as usable, because sometimes information that comes from a supplier isn't necessarily written for a formulator. It's more of a technical overview. And so formulators are left with a little bit of guesswork or some conversions and so forth. So we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Brands are it's also important that they do blender studies so that there's continuity of class 1 nutrients throughout an entire blend. They should be running pilots and doing testing to have absolute control and to better understand the nutrient levels in their product at the beginning, middle, and end of a run, all the way through continuity. Okay, one watch out in sport nutrition is amino acid claims, because amino acid claims on sport nutrition products, let's say it's a protein product and you claim the level of branched chain amino acids or leucine, that becomes a class 1 nutrient claim. Now it's important that sometimes suppliers provide information when they break down the protein and analyze it to individual amino acids. In that process, which is called hydrolysis, the amino acids going from a bound protein state into free amino acids picks up the weight of molecular water. So sometimes you really have to go into supplier documentation to make sure that they've converted it back so that when they analyze 100 grams of protein, you're getting 100 grams of free amino acids or very close to it, to make sure that you have an accurate understanding of different amino acid levels within the intact protein ingredient that's going into the blender. Class 2 nutrients, a little less scrutiny, especially in sport nutrition, but these are nutrients that are typically, these are found in the nutrition facts panel. These are naturally occurring nutrients, and a good example would be in protein powders, you would have calcium and potassium. So these are typically class 2 nutrients, because a lot of, more times than not, they're not going to be fortified. They're just naturally occurring. So with class 2 nutrients, the nutrient must be testable at about 80% or higher what's on the label. Now, third group nutrients are those nutrients which are typically associated with health and health risk and disease. So there's a special attention for the third group nutrients. These are nutrients that cannot exceed 120% of label claim. Okay, and it gets a little bit tricky, especially in some foods, because that doesn't create a lot of room for error. So if you have, let's say, cholesterol and you label it at 10 milligrams in a protein powder, you really can't, you got 12 milligrams, that's your clearance. There's not a lot of room there. So there's some things that you need to do on the formulation standpoint to ensure greater accuracy of compliance. Third group nutrients are calories, sugar, total fat, saturated fat, cholesterol, and sodium. And again, whatever you have in your nutrition facts panel, or even in a supplement facts panel, if they're in significant amounts, you cannot test out at greater than 20% above what you're labeling. Okay, ingredients always need to be declared, whether it's a food or a dietary supplement. In a food, they're listed in order of descending mass contribution. One important difference between foods, nutrition facts, and the ingredients below it is that you're not allowed to include what is called intervening information. And that's where you describe, intellectual property or special processing. That's not allowed within the ingredient list. It's supposed to be much more standard and common names for the ingredients that go in. And then with dietary supplements, it allows for a little bit more fanciful information within the body of the supplement facts panel. So if you have specific ingredients with some processing or a trademark name or whatever, that's where that ingredient can be explained a little bit more. And then in the other ingredients, which is listed below the supplement facts panel, that's where you find the non-active ingredients such as carriers or acidulants or flavors. Daily values really describe how the level of a nutrient in one serving compares to the daily value associated with the DRIs, the general standards that we work from. The daily value is you can set it at 2,000 or you can do it at 2,500 calories, but in general, most labels will use 2,000 calories. Now, when it comes to sport foods, protein, it's not mandatory that you make a daily value claim on a product in general. However, if it is a protein product or you talk about protein or the product's position as protein, you make a claim about protein, the standard of identity is protein, bar, protein mix, whatever it is, then you do have to make a declaration of the percentage DV for protein. Okay, and then when you're determining your percentage DV for protein, it's based on digestibility and the amino acid score together, which is PD-Cas. So this has kind of become an interesting area, especially with the emergence of more plant proteins and plant protein blends. So you have to make sure that you have the right percentage DV based on the PD-Cas associated with the ingredients that are providing the protein. All right. So to kind of wrap up a little bit here, just part of your game plan, what are your scoring plays? Number one, you have to master your product or your ingredient. And this starts with the documents that you receive, ingredient and finished good testing. You have to be the master of all of that. Know your product inside and out, okay? Third group doesn't always leave a lot of room to, so when you formulate a product and you think about the third group nutrients, it's good to start at whatever the max is of the specification and then work down. If you have an ingredient that has a min and a max, a minimum and a maximum, if you start at the maximum and formulate there, you should not be non-compliant because that's what the maximum is. And then you can sort of work from there. The opposite is true with class 1 nutrients. Tackling class 1 nutrients to make sure that you're compliant, start with the minimum for that ingredient. And then that's really, you're not going to be below that because that's the minimum level. Okay? Once again, suppliers and brands need to work together. Suppliers need to provide information that's very usable and practical for brands to use when they formulate products and when they develop their labels and their claims. Okay, always understand when to include the percentage DV for protein and make sure you use the right PD-Cas to generate your percentage daily value for protein. And don't forget to include significant sources of calories and understand where all sources of calories may come from, okay? Even organic acids like malic acid or citric acid, which is used to manipulate pH or to provide sort of a fruity bite, okay? These are calorie providers. So make sure that you understand where all the calories come from. And again, this goes back to having good good supplier information so that you can be very compliant when you generate your labels and make your claims.